Turn to Judges chapter 6, or in your Sunday school book, page 18. While you're getting there, do we have any praise reports or prayer requests this morning?
Hey, I have a friend in works with me in West Virginia, and he has got an infection from cellulitis. Real high fevers. He's been in ICU, went home, and now he's back in a hospital, but not ICU. Last night was 104.8 fever.
What's his name?
Tony Lilly. Oh, I got a little lie.
We'll remember Tony this morning. That sounds horrible. Anybody else? Gail Reno?
Hannah will be traveling this week.
Hannah will be traveling this week. Anybody else?
I start actually on my floor tomorrow.
Yeah. All the tests and all the the time of study and preparation, and you're getting to know your job. That's over. Now it's time to go to work. And then throw all that stuff out the window and get to the real part.
Love it.
And if you don't go to Carolyn, she can tell you all about it.
Love it.
All right. There are no other prayer requests. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Sandra, will you open us with it?
Lord, we thank you for this day, this beautiful day to come and worship you. Father, we pray that you would be with James as he leads us, be with Brother Bob as he brings the message this morning, be with each of us, Lord, that we might listen and understand and know the word and know why we're here to get to know you more. Father, we pray for these that have been mentioned that are battling problems. Lord, I just ask you to be with each and every one, and perhaps someone that we have failed to mention this morning. Father, I pray for Brother Bob's dad and the heart cath that he'll have next Monday. Father, I pray that will go well. And Lord, the others that were mentioned, we just leave everything in your hands, Father. We know that you know all about us, and we just ask that you would just continue to watch over us, be with our country. Lord, we lift our country up to you. And Father, I just ask all of this in your Son's name. Amen.
So who, when you read the lesson today, got to thinking about, this is us today? Anybody think this is us today? Or was it only me? Did anybody think that, this is the Methodist Church today? This is America today? Because all of those things hit me when I was reading this lesson today. We'll talk about it, and the lesson never went into that, but it reminded me of where we are today. And we'll, as we get into the lesson, dig deeper, we'll have that discussion. So last week we talked about Joshua and the miracle of the sun and moon standing still. We're in these portraits of courage. Each of these people that we're going to study is doing something courageous. Joshua's courage was to pray to God in front of everybody for a miracle, to have the boldness to share his faith in God in front of all of Israel, is what it said. So that was his courageous act that God honored. This is going to be a much different type of courage that we see with Gideon today. We're not Gideon leading the army of 300 into battle. We're Gideon at home with his family. Sometimes it takes more courage to deal with things within your own family than it does out in public or out in the world or out and deal with stuff. So I want you to think about that. This is a very intimate lesson if you think about it. the crux of the lesson is a contrast or a conflict even between Gideon and his dad. This is going to be a very tough thing if you think about it very personally on that level that Gideon is going to be asked to do. But before we get into the lesson, what do we know about Gideon from the first 24 verses of chapter 6? Who comes to visit Gideon in the first 24 verses of chapter 6?
An angel of the Lord.
An angel of the Lord. Why does the angel of the Lord come to see Gideon? The angel, that's right, not a, the. This is either pre-incarnate Christ or it's a vision of God himself embodying this ministering spirit that comes to see Gideon. So why does he come to see Gideon? There have been 40 years of peace after Deborah. Deborah, does anybody remember who Deborah was? She was a judge, yes. Woman judge. Took care of Israel, led them. They wouldn't go without Deborah going into battle. Deborah, and then she writes this huge song and sings this huge song at the end of chapter 5. What an example of faith. And then for 40 years, it says at the end of chapter 5, Israel had peace. Israel was at peace. There was nothing that went on. But throughout that 40 years while they had peace, what's Israel doing? Well, they're dabbling. They're dabbling with sin. So the Israelites in Canaan are dabbling with the sin of their neighbors, which is idol worship. And we're going to see in the first part of chapter 6 that idol worship was Baal, worshiping the idol of Baal and Ashtoreth. Even Gideon's papa was involved with it at some level, because on his property, we're going to see that these altars and groves or Asherah poles, trees, had been put up in order to worship these gods of fertility, these gods of the nations of Canaan. Baal was considered one of the great gods, great, huge god in the region. And it's at this altar. So, the angel of the Lord comes to see Gideon, and they've been harassed, been attacked, been bothered by the Midianites. Who were the Midianites? Who remembers the most famous Midianite? He was a priest of Midian. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law. So not all the Midianites are terrible people. Moses' father-in-law was a great guy. Gave him great advice, godly advice. Gave him a beautiful daughter, Zipporah. Wonderful folks, and then now they are...
Relatives.
What?
Relatives.
Yeah, they're kinfolks. Even kinfolks. The Levites even have some of the Midianites married into them. So now they're harassing them. Now they're attacking them. Now they're being used by God to punish Israel for their sin with these idols. And the Amalekites. And the Lord says to Gideon, verse 14, the Lord looked upon him and said, "Go in this thy might, and thou shalt save Israel from the hand of the Midianites. Have I not sent thee?" And then Gideon, and he said unto him, "O my Lord, wherewith shall I save Israel? Behold, my family is poor in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house." Kind of an important thing right there. "I am the least in my father's house. And the Lord said unto him, Surely I will be with thee, and thou shalt smite the Midianites as one man." God gives a promise to Gideon that he's going to be the one that delivers Israel, or God's going to use him to be the one that delivers Israel from the hand of the Midianites. Gideon's like, "All right, I'm ready, let's go do it." No, he's not. Gideon says, "Prove it. Prove it to me." Just as Gideon does later on. This is kind of how Gideon is. He wants some proof. He wants some reassurance. Maybe a little timid. And he said to him, "If now I have found grace in thy sight, then show me a sign thou talkest with me." Well, you're standing right there. Can't you see it? And this is not that he means that we're having this conversation, but it's you're really God. That you're really the one that has the power to do this. "Depart not hence, I pray thee, till I come forth unto thee and bring forth my present and set it before thee." And he said, "I will tarry until thou come again." And Gideon went and made ready a kid and an unleavened cakes of an ephah of flour. The flesh he put in a basket, and he put the broth in a pot, and brought it out unto him under the oak, and presented it. And the angel of God said unto him, "Take the flesh and the unleavened cakes, and lay them on this rock, and pour out the broth." And he did so. And the angel of the Lord put forth the end of his staff that was in his hand and touched the flesh and the unleavened cakes. And there rose up a fire out of the rock and consumed the flesh and the unleavened cakes, and the angel of the Lord departed out of his sight. Nice little miracle right there, right? He touched it, the rock brought forth fire and consumed the offering. What does the consuming of an offering by God indicate? That it's accepted, that that offering is accepted in his sight. And when Gideon perceived that he was an angel of the Lord, Gideon said, Alas, Lord God, for because I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face. And the Lord said unto him, Peace be unto thee, fear not, thou shalt not die. Then Gideon built an altar there to the Lord and called it Jehovah Shalom. Unto this day it is an Ophrah of the Abizarites. That was verse 24. So now we've got Gideon given this call from God to deliver Israel from the hand of the Midianites. But before he does that, we have this lesson. Gideon's going to have to get his house straight before he's able to do that. Take a deep breath. Here we go into our lesson. Who would read 25 through just 25, 26?
Now it came to pass the same night that the Lord said to him, Take your father's young bull, the second bull of 7 years old, and tear down the altar of Baal that your father has. Cut down the wooden image that is beside it. Build an altar to the Lord your God on top of this rock in the proper arrangement. And take the second bull and offer a burnt sacrifice with the wood of the image which you shall cut down.
Thank you, Jessica. All right, Gideon, you saw that I accepted your offering. Now you got to go home and do something. I wonder what kind of relationship Gideon had with his father. We don't know, right? The lesson even said we don't know if Gideon took part in the sacrifices. We don't even know if his father took part in the sacrifices that occurred on his property.
We do know how Joash handled the men that came for his son.
Yep. How did that happen? He defended him completely. But we're going to see where the lesson presumes something at the end. And we'll get there in just a minute. But we do know how he acted later. So whether it was a change in heart or whether that's the way he was all along, I don't know. I want to try to bring this back to us today, though, right? So, how are you going to handle your dad acting bad? Or your dad allowing something bad to go on? How are you going to handle taking your dad's prized bull?
Second prize.
Second prized bull, but he was 7 years old. So 7-year-old bull, that's one you kept around a while. That's one that didn't make it to dinner. That's the one that you're using to breed and to have other prized bulls around.
Do you think he left the best for his father's breeding stock or for his father to offer to the Lord?
It's a great question. I don't know. But at this point, we know that he's asked to take something special from his dad. To take it from him. Would any of you have pause for that? Just, Mikey, what do you think?
Yeah, if he was,
I'm going to take my dad's shotgun that he had since he was,
yeah.
7 years old, and I'm going to go hawk it. Or I'm going to go sell it, try to get something out of it that I can do something good with. No, I'm not going to do that. I'll say, God, I'm not sure that that's the right thing for me to do. That's going to offend my dad. It's going to be something that's something personal, right? God's asking him to do something very personal. And not only that, he's asking him to go destroy some stuff that's sitting on his dad's property. Can we assume or can we not assume that his dad was complicit in the construction of that on his property?
He knew it.
He knew it.
At the worst, he let it do.
At the bare minimum, he gave permission for that. And at the maximum, he was part of it. We don't know where in that spectrum that he lies. But at the bare minimum, he let it happen.
My opinion, or it seems to say that it was very close to him. I mean, it was his.
We're going to see that I think Patsy's right, is that he had some, by Gideon's actions, we're going to see that there is skin in the game for Gideon's dad, for the destruction of this. Otherwise, what would have Gideon done?
He would have said, Dad, the Lord told me I got to do this.
And during the daylight, he'd have just wiped it out. We got to take care of this. But no. Why does Gideon not do it during the day? And we're going to read that verse here in just a second. So, anything in that first section? Again, I take the lessons approach here on page 20, second column, first paragraph. That Gideon's father had a Baal altar on his property is a sad commentary on how far the people of Israel had already drifted from fidelity to the Lord. It indicated that their people were in the process or in the middle of idolatrous relationships with the other gods. They were doing that. Why is God sending Midian? Because of their behaviors toward Baal. Because of their behaviors towards the other gods of the land. Going against what it said in what we see as the golden text. For thou art a holy people unto the Lord thy God. The Lord thy God hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself above all people that are upon the face of the earth. Instead of them being holy, sanctified, separated, they're falling into the sins of the nations that they're around. And God warned them against. That's why Midian's coming. And for the Midianites to be addressed, Gideon's got to take care of this in his own house first.
We didn't really talk much about it, but the Asherah poles were what were being burned up to consume.
Yeah. Yes.
Something about that, speaks to burning up your sin.
Yes. What was used as evil and as part of your identification with this sin is going to be consumed. It's got to be burned up. It's got to be taken away. And the fact that that's being used to consume the offering to God, this special bull, it's not just ironic. It tells a good story. What does it tell about us, though?
I was just thinking an application that happened this week, Sandra told me about. Somebody told her that he visited the guy and used rough language, and the guy says, look, says, I love the Lord, I don't talk like that, I don't talk in my house like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we should be that way. Gideon's dad, Joash, yeah, evidently wasn't that way. Even if he didn't build the thing, somebody built it on his land. And in a right relationship with the Lord, he should have said, these gotta go.
Yep, this can't stand. And evidently, I think evidently, at that point, he wasn't there yet. He wasn't there yet. It's going to take an act of courage for Joash to come to a life-changing moment. And again, I think that's something that we need to remember too, that sometimes it's our act of courage that's going to be the catalyst for somebody to come to God. It may be the thing that they see that turns them around. So, let's look at Gideon's his response to this angel telling him what to do. The angel gives him instructions on what to do with the bull from his dad's flock, or herd, the bull from his herd, the poles and the altar of Baal and the Asherah grove. These are the things you're going to tear down and use that to burn. Gideon, verse 27. Who would read that?
Then Gideon took 10 men of his servants and did as the Lord had said unto him. And so it was, because he feared his father's household and the men of the city, that he could not do it by day, that he did it by night.
Was Gideon afraid? Okay, he's nodding her head yes. It says that, right? It's pretty clear. Because he feared his father's household and the men of the city. So was Gideon afraid? Yes. What did that fear cause Gideon to do?
Did it by night.
Do what God says, but under the cover of night.
That he did.
Is that a bad thing?
God didn't tell him to do it for that time.
God did not give him instructions to go out in broad daylight to do it.
But
He
he
did
also
not.
didn't trust that God would protect him no matter when.
Ooh, Terry brings something in from left field here that maybe he didn't trust God to protect him during the daylight. That's an interesting point. Does God get on to Gideon?
No?
No.
That's one thing we have to remember, is that God doesn't say anything about Gideon doing it the way he did.
He may have been thinking, next time I should be a little bit more specific. If
in a certain way.
I think it had to be done at night. And I proposed that Gideon did it exactly right, and the fear was a godly fear. It was a fear of wisdom. Not a fear of wisdom, but a fear brought on by wisdom.
They would have stopped him if he did it in the daylight.
There would have been some consequences, not just consequences, but some challenge if he had done it in daylight. And what does God use Gideon to do later on? This great work that he promised him in the first part of the chapter, to deliver the people from Midian. So Gideon, we don't know, well, I'm not going to say if, but this ensured that that path was going to be continued, that God's promise to Gideon in the first part of the chapter would be able to be continued in the last part.
Nevertheless, he did.
And he did it, Diane. He absolutely did it.
He obeyed.
And I think he obeyed, and I think that was wisdom. I think that fear led to wisdom. Now, does that ever happen to us? Does fear of an outcome make us do something smart? Like what? You said sure awful fast.
There's a lot of times when you know you're supposed to do something and you delay because of certain circumstances. But in the end, you go ahead and do it, no matter the repercussions.
I didn't know if you heard that, if anybody could hear Diane, which said sometimes you delay under certain circumstances, but you continue to do it. You will do it, but the circumstances don't allow you to do it immediately after.
You don't change a light bulb. You're going to stand on something. But if you're sensible, you're going to stand on something. Right.
There you go. Or you're going to ask somebody to help you.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought about. Yeah,
Yeah,
I was talking
he
about,
better speak
you
someone
got
I
the
know.
extension ladder.
Yeah.
Do something, she said, that's awful high up there. Well, that's no big deal, but
That's right. What does somebody-
She can call 911.
It's, oh, Terry, the older I get, the more
That's right.
I understand it. One time, I'll give you a story on my dad. You know, he wasn't afraid of anything, and that was his problem. He was cutting those oak trees down the farm. Do you guys remember this? He was cutting those oak trees, and he had a 40-foot wooden extension ladder. 40-foot wooden extension ladder.
With a chainsaw.
With a chainsaw. So he's up on the end of this 40-foot extension ladder with a chainsaw, cutting these limbs off so the tractors and stuff can come under and farm. Trying to do something nice. It was something that needed to be done all by himself down there at the farm. Guess what happens? Cuts a limb, goes up against the ladder, and he's hanging there with one hand. And somebody drives by and says, "Oh, there's Russell." So they made it down. They stop and say, "Okay, I don't have anything. Hold on. They get to the Bandana Ag. They go get a big A, and they come down and they rescue Dad with the big A.
Oh my goodness.
How did he hang that long?
He was tough.
Toughest thing.
Tough. I think he wound up throwing the chainsaw on the ground, and it was just sitting there kind of holding with that tree limb. He couldn't let go of the tree limb, and he couldn't let go of that. So it was like this, like 10 minutes. So what would have fear and wisdom taught him? Well, don't do that yourself. Have some common sense. Have somebody there holding the ladder. Don't cut a limb. There's so many things that could have been right if you stop and think about it and use wisdom to make a decision. I believe Gideon used wisdom to make this decision. And it's because we all have this, God gives us this sense of maybe self-preservation even. Reasoning. Why don't we drive 100 miles an hour? Why don't we just walk through traffic? Why don't we? Because we have this self-preservation. God gives us the sense God gave a goose. Sometimes He
He
gives
must
to
have been
us.
over 25 years old is all I got.
Yes, Gideon would have had it because under 25 you're Superman.
Yeah,
and
he
10 foot
wouldn't
tall,
have
bulletproof.
cared about wisdom.
I have to admit that I did not study much. Listen, did the people know that Gideon did this, or did he go and say, "Dad, I have done this"?
We're going to read here in just a minute.
It reminds me of, I heard
I
a
did
man
this too.
tell me one time, so what age were you when you start stopping at the railroad? When you're younger, you just kind of, go over it.
there is a level of, hopefully,
At least looking for wisdom.
yeah, at least trying to, and I believe this verse says that's exactly what Gideon did. He feared his father's household. He brought 10 men with him too. He gathered up 10 men, and that's how word gets out, right? 2 people can't keep a secret. Well, 11 of them can't keep a secret either. So Gideon and his men, they go at night. This is the following night, so we're still at night when the angel tells Gideon to do that. During the day, he gathers up his folks, and the next night, they go and take care of what he does. And they do it by night. Anything in there, it talks about criticizing Gideon because of the fear, and then it kind of gets to the last paragraph there. Gideon also must have reckoned that the cover of darkness would not shield him from eventual danger. Well, it's going to be obvious, right? He was afraid of not only his family, his father's household, but the men of the city. This was something that was very well known. It wasn't like this was something done in the back corner somewhere. This is where people went to worship. And he knew that once this act was done, something was going to happen. The other shoe would drop. There was going to be repercussions.
But read that next sentence.
Oh, I've got it underlined. He was subject to fears, but he was not a coward. If he had been, he would have not gone through with the task. Or he might have left town immediately after, never to return. And this is one I underlined too. As future events revealed, Gideon's seemingly cowardly act might have been an entirely reasonable and prudent course of action. So that whole conversation we just had, I based on that one sentence right there. It may very well have been the most prudent thing Gideon could have done to do it at night. And we'll see God used Gideon later on and was able to use him later on. So who would read the last section right there, 28 through the end?
And when the men of the city arose early in the morning, behold, the altar of Baal was cast down, and the grove was cut down that was by it, and the second bullock was offered upon the altar that was built. And they said to one another, Who hath done this thing? And when they inquired and asked, they said, Gideon, the son of Joash, hath done this thing. Then the men of the city said unto Joash, Bring out thy son, that he may die, because he hath cast down the altar of Baal, and because he hath cut down the grove that was by it.
Stop right there. Thank you. Thank you. So, yeah, I had a thought as we were going through it. So, early the next morning,
See, we don't know that those men wouldn't tell anybody. We don't know what. We don't know that those men, those 10 men, wouldn't tell anybody. Because it makes you believe here, it says, when the men arose, behold, they saw the altar.
Oh, yeah, that's how they found out.
That's
yeah,
how-
verse 29 though, they knew it was Gideon. So who would have known it was Gideon?
They asked.
One of the 10 servants.
Who did they ask? One of the 10 people that was with him.
Somebody's just gonna ask, who did it?
Yeah, who did this? Who did this? And one of the guys was like, it wasn't me. But I'm just kidding. They're the only ones that knew, right? I mean, I'm presuming that, Diane, that may be me stretching a little, and forgive me if I am. But there were only 11 people involved with the act.
So you're saying they're tattletales?
Yes. One of them was probably covering his rear end
I
and
said
said,
they just preserve their own life.
that's right. They're like,
But they were also involved, so that really doesn't
Well,
relinquish
they were also servants.
guilt.
they're also servants.
Joash came and asked.
Yeah, if Joash came and asked him, yeah, boss, it was your boy. Regardless, it came out. But let's look at that in the very first sentence. Early in the morning. What do you guys get up to do early in the morning? Drink coffee. You can't stop. Yeah, early in the morning, first thing you do, drink coffee. What do you do? I mean, what would make them go out to the altar of Baal early in the morning?
Smell smoke.
This,
I was wondering
Barbecue.
how they did this, and not wake somebody up. Yeah, that was another way.
yeah. What'd you say?
Somebody's got the trigger going this morning.
Yeah, somebody's got their grill going early today. Somebody's barbecuing. So we got this cow on the altar. We've got the trees cut down. We've got this burning flame.
Well, I had a full night's work.
They had a big night at work, yeah.
And to burn up a cattle,
Yeah.
it's gonna take some wood.
It takes a lot of wood. That's a big fire. That's a big attempt right there.
Big barbecue.
And this wasn't some young calf either. We're talking about 7-year-old, probably breeding stock bull.
But then they use the wood
Yes, from the Astra.
And it's greenwood.
Yeah, and they cut these
See,
trees.
it's a bigger deal to burn.
No,
It's possible that some of the grove was, yeah.
they took a tree and they would, Astra was kind of.
Oh, so it wasn't a rooted tree.
But it could still be rooted. Think of the Washington thing in Noble Park. They would carve, this Astra image in this tree trunk. And so it wasn't alive.
It's kind of like Adam's
It's
apple.
already dead.
It's kind of like Adam's apple.
Yeah.
Adam's owl in his front yard.
I've got to stop and look at the owl.
You gonna stop worshiping the owl in Adam's yard?
Yeah. The owl from the road looks good, but I'm sure it looks good close up.
So built out of the trunk of a pine tree, you have this.
Yeah, it's kind of a profane little thing.
Yeah, it is kind of dirty. It's real bad. I believe you do something like
God is
that. So they burn that up. The people of the town, first thing in the morning, recognize it. Whether it was part of their act of worship that they went there in the morning regularly to go see this, or it was such a big public thing that all you do is look out your window, or it was so close to everybody that all you have to do is smell the ash and the burning of the bull. It was something that was part of their day-to-day. It was something that was so close to what they were doing. Again, it wasn't done in a corner, and I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is it wasn't something that was hidden. Their sin was part of who they were. Their sin was so part of their culture, when that part of it was removed, they knew it immediately. Is that making sense? That they identified that this thing,
It would change the whole landscape.
it did. It changed it.
Anybody would notice it at a blink.
If it was so ingrained in who they were, and then for all of a sudden for it to be gone, and everybody knew it, it had to be something that was so important to them.
Well, when I read this, when you think about burning up a cow, these cows weigh, the bulls will weigh 2,000 pounds.
2,000 pounds.
It's gotta be one of those Jack Ruby fires where there's, you've seen Jack build a fire like for picnics and stuff. It's just huge. It's gotta be visible all over the community.
Everybody would know about it.
Well, I'm wondering if these people didn't know something was going on and they were afraid to go check on it. And we even,
Bunch of saws going on.
Yeah. Hacking and stuff and so.
Go see what's going on.
They didn't have the steel and Husqvarna fired up.
We could all be under the cover of the Lord, though.
Oh, it could, yes.
They might have not known one thing.
When God asked Gideon to do it, and Gideon did it, then God took over.
Yeah.
Regardless, we know God protects Gideon, God honors things, and something's going to happen with Gideon's daddy that's going to give me an idea that there's God's hands at work in all of this.
Or that fire could have consumed that animal.
In a minute.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Absolutely. We just saw the angel of the Lord consuming soup.
It's just conversation and what we know as people.
Yeah, that's right. They
Then you
could
have to add what the Lord can do to it, and we don't know all
And
that.
we don't.
have been wielding an axe that made no sound. It didn't make no
That would have been really cool.
Well,
Just-
my little neighbors would know.
Yeah. My neighbors would have said, hey, what's going on out there?
That makes no sense.
Yeah, the only axe that doesn't make any sound is the axe that's leaning against the wall. Floated? Yeah. So they said to one another, who has done this? And when they inquired and asked, first place I would have gone would have been to Joash's house, right? Because it happened on his property. Hey, Joash, why'd you get rid of our altar? Well, we got things burned up
They
over
didn't
here.
say that.
What?
They didn't say that, though.
No, it says, they said to one another, who has done this?
They knew who did it.
And when they inquired and asked, they said, Gideon, the son of Joash. Who did they ask? We don't know who they asked. But if it had been me, all I'm saying is if it had been me, I'd been right to the guy's house.
Did they all go there every day to worship?
I don't-
Is that?
That's something that we probably could study a little bit more on what they did as far as this Baal and Asherah worship. I don't know the details about that. But I think by the fact that they got up early in the morning, it was part of their, it may have been part of their routine. It may have been part, like going to the bluegrass is part of some people's routine in the morning. They were going to Joash's house.
And the fact that he did it at night, usually
There wouldn't be anybody there at night.
If you notice that people that worship a false god, when I think of are Muslim, that they're very faithful.
Oh, yeah.
Bow down towards Mecca and worship a false god every day.
Multiple times a day.
It's built into their society. It's a societal expectation, and there's a shunning of people.
If you
that
don't do it.
obey it, yeah.
And I think, Glenn, that is true today with us. There's a new movie I just saw advertised. I told Jessica about it the other day. The God of Air. Is that what it is? God of Air?
The god of air.
No, the God of Air. Air.
Oh, air.
It's about, no, the power of the air. Sorry, power of the air. And it's about modern media and its idolatrous relationship to us, or our idolatrous relationship to it. And it talks about how so many movies and TV shows and stuff are literally almost worshipped by people, and how we devote so much of our time to that. And a guy from Africa, it's a preacher from Africa, comes into this small church and he's preaching and telling these people, be aware the devil comes, and he's coming through your TV, he's coming through what you see at the movies, he's coming through what you watch and what you hear. And it really hits a guy in the heart because he likes watching. I know I'm guilty of this. I love watching horror movies and action adventure movies and stuff. I love that. But is that my idol? Oh man, I better watch out.
And
it is.
we would tell probably somebody comes to our house, don't use that language.
Yeah.
But we turn that TV on and let her run.
And let it go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Guilty of it last night. Watching a movie that had that language in it. Guilty of it right here. So think about it. Is that idol worship so ingrained in us? Was this idol worship so ingrained in them that as soon as it was removed, all heck breaks loose?
And if you don't do it,
You're shunned.
you're shunned.
Yep.
Is
You
that-
go, you go to work and there's like this big new movie that comes out and everybody's talking about it. Oh no, you tell them, no, I can't watch that because it's got nudity or it has foul language or so I just can't watch it, then you're shunned. You're made fun of. Oh, maybe that's what we're supposed to be made fun of, right? So, that's what we see today. Not only does it occur with obvious false god worship, I think it occurs with our idol worship here in Bandana today. That's the point I was going to make about that.
And
So,
we're far too much like the world.
and that's, again, the heart of the lesson and the scriptures from Deuteronomy. The Jews were supposed to be so separate from the world that they were going to get shunned. They were going to get called out. They were going to be different. And they're in trouble today in our lesson because they look just like their neighbors. They look just because they were doing exactly what they were.
God was letting the Midianites oppress them because of that.
Exactly. The Midianites and the Amalekites were going to oppress them because they look just like them. All right, the last game, we want to read those last two since I catch you
I'd love
off.
to. I'd love to.
Sorry about that.
And Joash said unto all that stood against him, Will you plead for Baal? Will you save him? He that will plead for him, let him be put to death whilst it is yet morning. If he be a god, let him plead for himself, because one hath cast down his altar. Therefore, on that day, he called him Jerubbaal, saying, Let Baal plead against him, because he hath thrown down his altar.
Thank you.
That was smart, really smart. Dad was smart.
Dad was pretty sharp.
Doesn't it remind you of how when you question, Jesus answered by questions?
Yes. Which prophet does he sound like here? It's talked about it in the lesson. Elijah,
Elijah.
right? The prophets of Baal where they're cutting themselves and trying to spend hours and hours trying to get Baal to consume their sacrifice.
He must be gone to the bathroom.
He's gone to the bathroom. He's asleep or he's gone to the bathroom. So even before that, long before that, we have this instance of Joash saying the same thing. Well, if your God's, if Baal's real, let him handle my son. I ain't got to do nothing. Let him do it. And I like verse 31. They were not just after Gideon. It doesn't seem like. If you read that, I Yes, it says they were after Joash too. And Joash said to all that stood against him, will you plead for Baal? Will you save him? He that will plead for him, let him be put to death while it's still morning. And he's saying, if Baal's real, let Baal punish my son. Let Baal put Gideon to death. You guys don't have to do it if he's real. If your God is legitimate, let him stand up for himself. That's what Elijah did later on, and gave them plenty of time, a whole day, to prove that Baal was real. Did it ever happen? No. And Joash was so certain that he used his son's name, or changed his son's name, to be a constant reminder of how Baal is powerless. Changed his son's name before God and everybody to the one who, or let Baal contend against him. Bring it on. Bring the fight. Fight with the boy right here. Let it happen. Calls him that from then on.
Amazingly, nobody else in the Bible does. They still call him Gideon.
Yeah, they still call him Gideon, but his father's house and to those that he's talking to, let Baal fight against him. Never does. Gideon is delivered from all that. Gideon's awesome. So, let's look at who are the people that came to Joash's house. Were they Midianites? Were they Amalekites? Were they Hittites? Perizzites? Who were they?
The men of the city.
The men of the city. Where were they from? The city. What was their nationality?
Israelites.
They were Jewish. They were Jewish. They were the Jews. These were the folks that were getting punished by God with the attack of the Midianites. These were Jewish folks. And it's a sad commentary on page 22, next to last paragraph. It is a further sad commentary on the darkened spiritual awareness among the people of Israel that such anger and consternation, we hadn't heard that word in a while, are not recorded regarding the neglect of the true worship of God. Why were these people not just as mad because no one was worshiping God? They got mad because they tore down their Baal altar. Now, I'm not going to go into the details, but the worship of Ashtoreth and the worship of Baal often were very, very, we would say, profound. Extremely profound. You read about Samson and some of the other folks, even the patriarchs. There were cult prostitutes, and they were part of the worship of these idols. I mean, that profane. To some people, that's a whole lot of fun. When you take away their fun, they get mad. What would cause you to rise up and get mad if someone took it away from you today? Think about those things. If you who lost internet access yesterday on your phone? Most of us with Verizon lost internet access for a while. Did you get upset? Did you get angry? Did you whatever, you make a phone call for a little while? If your phone's your idol, then you've got an issue, right? Some people were very glad that they weren't getting phone calls yesterday. Lauren Kendall, who works at April's, she was like, I'm glad we don't have to answer the phone because no one's calling. There are things that we would get mad today if someone were to take it away from us. And some of those things are not great. Some of those things we put ahead of God. Some of those things we put way ahead. These guys were more mad about that than somebody taking away the ark, or people not going to the tabernacle to worship. They were more angry.
These guys, I think, felt that they had been attacked when Gideon tore down the worship thing.
Yes.
That happens a lot in our trying to discuss ideas anymore. People say, if you say something against an idea, they think you're attacking them. And we've gotten where we can't have a conversation because of that. There's a point there I'm going and I can't make it.
Keep coming, you're going to get there.
We need to be the ones that can listen to other ideas and reason with our neighbors rather than get mad at our neighbors. If we've got an argument, a gospel that saves, what people think about it shouldn't matter to us. You know, in a discussion, we shouldn't just get mad, walk away, we should stay with the discussion.
So did Joash, we said right when we read those words that he handled it very well. Did he use wisdom in how he talked with these people that were kind of mad to attack, not necessarily physically attack him, but were bringing these charges against him? Did he use wisdom to deal with that? He absolutely did, didn't he? That's one thing we need to remember, Glenn, is that we can't use our, and maybe even our initial reactions, our anger or being defensive or even running from something. We should pray that God gives us the wisdom to say the words that save, that say the words that change people, to say the words that make a difference.
What did God tell Samuel when the people wanted a king? They haven't rejected you, they rejected me. So when we take things so personally like that, we have to remember that they're not attacking us.
I like to take things personally. Constantly, I like to take things personally. That's who I am. So, good point. Excellent point. Samuel is a great example for that. I like, and we're almost out of time, on page 23, how confident was Joash that Baal would prove himself impotent? Was Joash not a Baal worshiper himself? We don't know. Perhaps he was a worshiper of Baal, but just not a very committed one. We do not know whether he put up the altar on his property himself or merely acquiesced to its construction by others. They're using extremely big words in this lesson today. Acquiesced. It's a good one. Still, we might expect that such a man would at least entertain the possibility of retribution by Baal against the destroyer of his altar. It seems likely then that Gideon's act of faith stirred his father's conscience and awakened his spirit to the emptiness and evil of idolatry. If so, then the Lord had already scored an open victory in his work with Gideon. I love that thought that Gideon, having faith to stand up to his dad, took his father's second prize bull, tore down the altar, tore down the Asherah, sacrificed it. Those things were enough for Joash to see that faith in God still matters.
I read half of that paragraph, and I wrote in the margin, God gave him the gift of faith, I believe. And then it came down and basically said that.
That's exactly right.
At the last sentence.
That is the opening, and it's the beginning of Gideon's acts of faith that he winds up going and delivering Israel through faith, through this huge trusting in God to work a miracle with 300 people over thousands and thousands and thousands. Sometimes it has to start up. Sometimes it has to start on what we would seem is a much smaller scale, but no less difficult, I think, for Gideon. I don't think it was more difficult for Gideon to go against his dad than it was for him to go up against the Midianites. It was just the first. Morning, Hazley. Hi. Oh, Carla, John, good to see you. So any other thoughts about the lesson? We'll go into the other commentary tonight. We have so much more that we can talk about. I didn't even scratch the surface. We can even talk about Deborah if y'all want to tonight. She was really cool. And Glenn sent me text during the service.
That's for tonight. That's a good quote.
All right. Any other thoughts about the lesson before we close?
On page 26, in the illustrated high points, one about the rat with mouth chewing the foot off of hanging eggs on the foot.
Yep. I'll tell you what, the illustrated high points, the last two lessons have been fabulous. I absolutely love it. Morning, Randy. All right, let's be dismissed from Sunday school with a word of prayer. Lord, thank you for this time together. Thank you for letting us study your word. Lord, let this word sink into our hearts and help us to have the courage that you gave Gideon and his father to stand up against idolatrous and evil acts. Give us, Lord, the spiritual wisdom, Lord, to know when and what to say that will change people's lives. And we know that's only through the power of your Spirit. We thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen.
people help each other.
Always